This is the World Organic News for the week ending 4th of September 2017. Jon Moore reporting. The Fukuoka Alternative. Masanobu Fukuoka's system of agriculture has been working successfully in Japan for 50 years. Its four principles are no tilling, no fertiliser, no weeding and no pesticides. There comes a time, usually in the heat of summer, when weeding and digging suddenly seem like a complete waste of time. The weeds will have grown back, the soil will need to be turned again and again. Could there be another way? Yes, there are many. The system I have developed is based upon the work of Masanobu Fukuoka. Trained as a microbiologist, Fukuoka was involved in attempts to eradicate pests from the Japanese rice crop. This required him to travel the country, ensuring no rice was being grown out of season. The idea was to deny pests a breeding ground between rice crops. He stumbled upon some wild rice that had sprung up of its own accord at the edge of a forest. This one incident changed the path of his life forever. If these rice plants could grow and thrive naturally, then it should be possible to grow crops with little human effort by copying nature. Many years of research, trials and errors led eventually to success, based on his four principles: no tilling, no fertiliser, no weeding and no pesticides. At first sight, these principles can be off-putting. They fly in the face of conventional agriculture. For over 50 years, his system has been working, and Masanobu Fukuoka has become a cult figure in Japan and across the world. His method is to clear the grasses from an area that is to become a garden, then to form ridges in the garden from 1 to 2 metres apart. A leguminous green crop, clover, is planted, and this forms the backbone of the system. The clover provides the nitrogen for the soil and, when it decays, most of the rest of the nutrients. The main crop, rice, wheat, tomatoes or whatever, are broadcast over the clover. Just as this crop is nearing the end of its life cycle, the next one is broadcast over the garden. The clovers take the place of the weeds in an ordinary garden, covering the soil and protecting it from erosion. As the first crop dies off, the new one grows up through the debris. In this way, the soil is never bare. Winds cannot remove topsoil or moisture, and the dying plants of the crop provide nutrients and air spaces in the soil for their roots as their roots decay. By carefully choosing which crop is to follow, the soil is renewed. Brassicas could be followed by carrots and these by sweet corn. After some years, the clover will begin to die out as it succumbs to diseases. A different clover should be broadcast prior to the soil becoming in any way denuded. This ensures that the system continues to run smoothly. It may even be a good idea initially to sow 4 or 5 different clovers to ensure that the soil is rich in these clover seeds, ready to exploit any bare soil that may result from the dieback of one species. It is always a good idea to plant more than one variety of seed anyway, because what will thrive in one season will not thrive in another. The vagaries of our climate alone suggest this precaution. As many will realise, this system is similar to Estadine's no-dig gardens. These utilise lucerne hay and oaten straw to suppress the weeds. The hay and straw are spread across the garden and planted into. I find the Fukuoka system closer to nature, in that it utilises the growth of plants on the spot to do the job. The fertiliser and pesticides used to produce the hay and straw could be imported to your veggie garden with the Dean system, as they could carry any weeds trapped in the hay and straw. Esther's gardens work. I have tried them, but I'm always on the lookout for easier ways of doing things, even if they may seem a little odd. I was impressed with the Fukuoka theory, but I wasn't entirely convinced that it would be suitable for Australian conditions, or any others for that matter. So I set about testing the ideas. When we bought our home, we discovered an old above-ground swimming pool base, which was sand over a clay base. Over this I broadcast white clover and rye corn in November. I watered the area heavily and then left it to its own devices. The clover sprouted first, covering the ground in a rich green carpet. fortnight later, the rye began to sprout up through the clover. We harvested just enough rye to keep the chooks going over winter. Just before I harvested the rye, I broadcast some oat seeds, and as the rye stems dried off and collapsed on the clover, the oats began to sprout and grow. I'm convinced that Fukuoka knows what he's talking about. This summer we will be growing our veggies in a carpet of clover. The beds have been prepared over winter, but they differ from those recommended by Fukuoka. We cut an old water tank in 3 and filled each section with horse manure during winter. The manure has rotted down to a lovely compost, and it will form the basis of our Fukuoka beds. This means I won't have to bend too far to broadcast seed or harvest crops. A combination of the Estradina Masanova Fukuoka systems may be the way to go if you don't have access to an old water tank. By using hay and straw base first and sowing clover and veggie seeds together, it may be possible to avoid any digging, even in the first year. And this is my project for next season. And that brings us to the end of this week's episode. If you've liked what you've heard, please tell everyone you know any way you can. I'd also really appreciate a review on iTunes. This may or may not help others to find us, but it gives this podcaster an enormous thrill. Thanks in advance. Any suggestions, feedback or criticisms of the podcast or blog are most welcome. Email me at podcast@worldorganicnews.com. Thanks for listening. I'll be back in a week.